Stop what you're doing. If you're new here, you should pick up from episode 1. You will never be able to guess what's happening in this story. That's a promise. If you think you're ready, let's enter Woojin's world together. As we enter... She said she was helping him, but she might have been leading him straight to hell. Woojin didn't realize it yet, but the one person he trusted might have been the reason everything was falling apart. Every lie, every time he's been manipulated, led him here. His face burned, not just from the heat, but from something sharper, like the tears on his skin were turning to cinder before they could fall. He wiped at his cheek, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. Smoke filled the air, thick, heavy. It stung his eyes the moment he forced them open, burned his throat as he tried to breathe, settled into his chest like something alive. He coughed, but it kept running. He didn't remember how he got here. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. His memory was hazy. One moment, he was falling apart. The next, he was here, running, burning, breathing something that didn't feel like air. His feet struck the uneven ground, cracked, shifting beneath him like it didn't want to hold him. He looked up, his chest tightened. The city, it looked like Seoul. At a glance, it was familiar shapes, buildings that almost didn't make sense. The longer he looked, the more twisted it looked. The angles wrong, structures bent, like something had crushed it, and it left it standing just unrecognizable. The sound hit him next, as well as the flies, or what looked like flies, all at once. The city was alive, cars, voices, movement, but too loud, too sharp. Every sound had been pushed too close to his ears. Then, nothing, silence. So complete it rang. Then it came back again, louder, distorted, over and over. Woojin flinched. His head throbbed. His thoughts struggled to keep up. This is hell. The realization came quietly. Not panic, not shock, just understanding. Every sense attacked all at once. No pause, no relief. As he ran, the thoughts slipped in between breaths. Was it work? The machine? Was it Minso? The fights? The distance? Was it leaving? Not being there? Minji. He just wanted to see her. That was all. The ground shifted beneath him again, forcing him forward, forcing him to keep moving. And behind him, a sound. Woojin looked up and saw it. The bridge, black, suspended over nothing. No support, no logic. Just waiting. But wait, what's that, water? No, he imagined it. He blinked, he looked again. It looked clear, calm. He slowed, just enough to feel it. Doubt, pain, loss. This. Can't even trust himself anymore. Behind him, the sound grew louder, closer, faster. No time. He didn't know what was right anymore. Didn't know what choice led to less pain. Didn't know if it even mattered. But he knew one thing. He didn't want it to end like this. His jaw tightened, and before he could think, before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. The ground vanished beneath him. Darkness swallowed everything. But before that moment, Woojin found himself consumed by darkness. We flash back to the present day, before it all happened. Zarya had been sitting at her desk longer than she realized, with her thoughts circling her like vultures ready to swoop in for the kill. The courthouse hearing from earlier still lingered in her mind. David E. pushing harder, Minso unraveling faster, and Woojin? She wasn't sure how long she could keep him calm. The thought kept circling in her mind. She knew she needed a new strategy, but she couldn't help to think. Was she helping him or deciding for him? She sighed and reached down into the small locked drawer in her desk. Inside were files she kept separate from everything else. Sensitive documents from the divorce case, patent records of his, ownership agreements, notes she trusted to no one else in the firm to handle. She slid the key into the lock and opened it. The drawer was empty. Zarya frowned. For a moment, she simply stared into the drawer as if the papers might reappear if she kept blinking. Slowly, she leaned forward and pushed the drawer open wider. Nothing. Not a single folder. Not even the old yellow sticky notes that she had tucked between the documents. Her brow tightened. She stood and opened the drawer beside it. Client files from old cases. Also, empty. She pulled open the next drawer. Empty. All empty. Now her movements were faster. She crossed the office and opened the filing cabinet against the wall. Older file cases she hadn't touched in months. Gone. Every folder, every document. The cabinet looked as if it never held anything at all. Zarya slowly closed the drawer. She turned in a slow circle inside her office, scanning the room. The blinds were where they always were. Her desk was undisturbed. The law books on the shelf sat perfectly aligned. Nothing looked touched. Nothing looked wrong. And that was the problem. She sat back in her chair and sat down slowly, her mind working through the possibilities. A clerk couldn't have done this. Security would have logged it. The cleaning staff didn't have keys, which meant only one thing. Someone with authority had entered her office and removed everything. Zarya leaned back in her chair, staring at the empty drawer. Her expression shifted from confusion to something sharper, something more dangerous. Because suddenly the question wasn't what was missing, it was why. Her mind began to replay conversations that she hadn't taken seriously enough at the time. Emily. Her voice came back first, clear, and the casual way that she had said it. Your computer has a mirror log running somewhere in the background. At the time, Zarya had assumed it was a glitch, some strange IT issue Emily would eventually fix. But now, her eyes moved slowly to the computer, the dark screen that sat on her desk in front of her. Then another voice surfaced. Dina. Low, uneasy. Some of Woojin's patents are being altered. His name is disappearing. David's name is appearing instead. Zarya felt a slow chill creep through her chest. First the computer, now the files. Gone. Not moved. Gone. She sat very still for a moment, letting the pieces settle into place. Someone had been inside her office. Someone with enough authority to erase everything without leaving a trace. Her gaze drifted around the room again. Nothing disturbed. Nothing unusual. And suddenly that normalcy felt worse than if the place had been ransacked. Because whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Zarya stood up slowly. The flash drive. The one that had been left in that strange box earlier. She hadn't even opened it yet. If the files were gone, that drive might be the only proof left of what Dina had found. She grabbed her keys from her desk and headed for the door. Her hand had just reached the handle before her phone rang. The sound sliced through the quiet office. She froze. For a moment, she just stared at the screen. Then her stomach tightened. Woojin. Something was wrong. She knew it. She answered immediately. Woojin? At first she heard nothing but breathing, uneven, broken. Then his voice came through the line, and she instantly knew something terrible had happened. She bolted for the exit. It took her exactly 22 minutes to reach his door. The door opened fast. Zarya, breathless, eyes wide with fear. She rushed to him immediately. Woojin? What happened? What's going on? He couldn't even speak at first. His breath came in heaving, disjointed gasp. Finally, he forced the words out. She's gone, Zarya. My baby. My Minji is gone. Zarya froze. Honestly, she didn't even hear a word that came out of his mouth. She just saw the terror on his face, the look in his eyes, and she instantly felt devastated for him. Then she wrapped her arms around him as he shook violently against her. They stayed like that for a long time. No words, just grief, thick enough to drown in. When Woojin finally lifted his head, his face was streaked with tears, eyes red and hollow. I can't lose her. Not again. Not like Hanu. Zarya blinked. Hanu's name. He rarely spoke her name out loud. It's been years. Woojin looked at her with an expression of a man unraveling and awakened at the same time. Time moved quietly around them both. Minutes, then hours. The clock on the wall had ticked. Cars passed somewhere outside, but inside the room, nothing had changed. Zarya and Woojin were still sitting where they had collapsed earlier, drinks in hand. Neither of them had spoken for a long time. Zarya hadn't asked what happened at the hospital. She hadn't asked what happened at all. Not yet. The silence between them felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass that would shatter if either of them had moved too quickly. Woojin finally rose from the floor, and Zarya had moved synergistically with him as if she had been tied to him. Woojin sat at the table fumbling with the whiskey bottle. Then he finally placed his elbows on his knees, his hands hanging loosely between them. His eyes were still glassy from crying, and Zarya had watched him carefully. She watched all of it, every single motion he made. She barely blinked. Part of her wanted to leave, surprisingly. Not because she didn't care, but because she knew something else had to be done. She needed answers. She needed to know what really happened to Minji. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet. Woojin, I need to go see Minso. Woojin slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, swollen, wet. For a moment, he just stared at her as if he hadn't understood what she had said. Then he stood. The sudden movement made Zarya rise halfway from the chair. What? His voice was sharp, raw. You think you can bring her back? His breathing was heavy now, anger mixing with his grief. You think you can fix everything? Zarya opened her mouth, but he cut her off. Well, you can't! He grabbed his jacket from the chair beside him. Zarya reacted instantly, stepping forward and grabbing the keys from the table before he could reach for him. Woojin, he stopped, looked at her. Then he rolled his eyes with a bitter, exhausted shake of his head. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. Then he slammed it behind him. Over in hell, Woojin hung there thinking he made another bad decision. As he hung there waiting for the drop to end, for death to come. It was strange in that moment. He thought of Zarya. The moment came through so vivid and clear. Just then, in that moment, he realized he loved her. Why had he talked to her that way? She should pull the plug on him. It would have been a gift to him in that moment. His thoughts were broken when another unfamiliar sound echoed. Woojin's eyes snapped open. His body braced, waiting for impact, for pain, for the ground to meet him. But it never came. For a moment, he just hung there, breathing hard, chest tight, tears streaming down his face. When he looked up, he realized that his robe was caught, snagged on a jagged piece of metal jutting from the broken roadway above, a spike, bent, sharp enough. It should have gone straight through him, but instead, it held him. Woojin swallowed. His breath became shallow and unsteady. Far below, the water churned, thick, dark. Not water, really. Shapes moved beneath the surface, large, too large. A massive black body twisting through the red current, eyes catching with what little light existed, locking onto him. It lunged. It missed, barely. The creature crashed back into the water, disappearing beneath the surface again, but not gone, waiting, watching. Woojin's hand shook. He reached desperately for another piece of metal that was across from him. His fingers slipped. Come on, come on. His hand caught the edge. He gripped it hard and pulled. Pain shot through his arms instantly, raw, sharp, like the metal itself was alive, burning into his skin. He cried out, but he didn't let go. Woojin lurched himself upward. When he reached the top, he didn't move at first. He couldn't. On the other side of the shattered roadway, the hellhounds circled. Massive, wrong. Their bodies looked long, too long. Their movements too precise. Their eyes locked onto him with a hunger that didn't feel natural. He stared at the creature, and he at him. He thought he was safe for the moment. Then it leaped. Oh my God. As it lunged through the air, he knew it could surely make it. From below, the water erupted. Then with the speed of light, a serpent-like creature shot upward, fast, silent. It wrapped around one of the hellhounds, coiling, dragging it underneath the water. It thrashed, claws scraping desperately against the edge. It was gone. Woojin swallowed hard. Tears slipped down his face again, cutting through the ash, falling without him even realizing it. He turned away. His gaze landed on the creatures that were inching toward him from the other side. What now? Meanwhile, in the present, the next day, morning came slowly. Zarya hadn't slept much. When she finally opened her eyes, the room felt heavy, the kind of weight that lingers after the night filled with too many thoughts and too few answers. Woojin's grief still sat in the back of her mind. The way he had collapsed, the way his voice had broken when he had said Minji's name. She sat up on the edge of the bed and rubbed her temples. This wasn't over. Not even close. And something about the situation didn't feel right. Not just Minji. David E. Minso's sudden legal moves. The pressure surrounding Woojin's patents. It all felt coordinated. Zarya swung her legs out of bed. If David was pushing this hard, there had to be a reason. And she knew exactly where to look. E-Industries had been fighting a quiet lawsuit for months. A rival company claiming David had stolen proprietary research. Zarya had briefly reviewed the case during an internal compliance meeting, but she had never looked at the full file. If David was desperate enough to threaten Woojin, maybe that lawsuit was the real reason. She stood and began getting dressed. If the company was hiding something, the litigation archive would have it. She grabbed her purse and headed for the office. She needed to think clearly. She needed space. More importantly, she needed information. She would go into the office, gather what she needed, and take a few days away from everything. This was going to be a different kind of fight. Legal battles, she understood. Corporate games, she could anticipate. But grief changed people. And she didn't know what kind of Woojin she would see once the shock had wore off. That kind of uncertainty worried her more than anything. The office was already alive when she arrived. Phone ringings, keyboard clicking, the ordinary noise of the normal morning. Zarya moved through it automatically, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. She paused near the hallway outside the legal department and pulled a small page from her notebook. She quickly wrote a message. Then she stopped and passed it to an associate. Can you give this to Emily in IT for me? He glanced at the paper. Then he looked back at her. A small crease formed between his eyebrows. Emily? Yes. He shifted slightly. She's not here anymore. Zarya frowned. What do you mean? She resigned yesterday. The answer landed strangely. Emily? Gone? Zarya stood there for a moment, absorbing it. Too many things were just disappearing lately. Files, information, now, people. She forced a polite nod and took the note back. All right, thanks. Then she continued down the hall. A faint unease crept into her chest. For a moment, she had to stop and gather herself. Then she turned and continued down the hall to her office. When she stepped inside and closed the door behind her, for a moment she just stood there. The room looked exactly the same way it always did. The blinds half drawn, her desk perfectly organized, legal texts stacked neatly along the shelf. Normal. Too normal. She exhaled softly and then walked toward her chair. Her mind was still circling the same thought. Emily resigned? That doesn't make sense. Emily liked work. She liked the chaos of the IT department, the puzzles that came with it and all that. She wouldn't just disappear overnight. Zara sat down and reached for a keyboard. If she was going to take time away from the office, she needed to gather a few files first. She typed her login. The computer paused. The litigation folder opened. Then it vanished from the screen, as if it never existed. Then a sharp tone sounded. Access denied. Zarya frowned. She typed it again, more carefully. The same message appeared. Access denied. Her brow tightened. That wasn't possible. She had administrator-level clearance on several internal legal items. There was no reason for her access to be suddenly denied. She reached for the phone to call IT, and that's when the door swung open before her hand could even touch the receiver. 2 security officers stood in the doorway, both in black suits, both expressionless. Miss Taylor? She slowly lowered her hand. Yes? HR needs to see you immediately. It's not a request, ma'am. A directive. Zarya sat there for a moment longer. Then the realization settled quietly into place. David. Of course he would move on her now. She stood. No argument, no question. She simply grabbed her purse and walked off with the officers into the hallway. Employees glanced up as she passed, some curious, some pretending not to notice. Security walked slightly behind her the entire way, not touching her, but making it very clear she wasn't free to go anywhere else. The HR manager was already waiting when she entered. A sealed envelope sat on her desk. The woman didn't look comfortable. Her eyes drifted toward the papers in front of her. Miss Taylor, please sit. Zarya didn't. She remained standing. And then the manager cleared her throat. The company has decided to move in a different direction. Your position here is being terminated, effective immediately. The sentence sounds rehearsed, like something she had practiced 100 times in the mirror. And then she slid the envelope across her desk. Zarya glanced down at it. Termination paperwork, final pay details, confidentiality agreements, the usual corporate cleanup. Then she let out a slow breath and looked up. You can tell David E. something for me. The HR manager stiffened slightly. This won't stop me from doing what's right. The woman didn't respond, but the brief flicker in her eyes confirmed what Zarya already knew. David had ordered this personally. Zarya picked up the envelope, turned, and walked out. Later that evening, there was a knock on Zarya's door, soft, uneven. She had just sat down on the floor, the termination envelope still lying unopened on the coffee table sitting in front of her. For the moment, she considered ignoring it. Then the knock came again. She stood and walked toward the door. When she opened it, Woojin was standing there. He looked worse than he had earlier. His eyes were swollen red, his shoulders slumped forward as if something inside him had collapsed, and his expression carried a mixture of apology and heartbreak. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He just looked at her with an expression that begged for forgiveness he didn't know her. Then he finally was able to speak. Zarya, I'm sorry. I didn't know that they were going to fire you. His voice broke mid-sentence. Then Zarya stepped aside. First, don't even think about apologizing. He looked down, searching the ground. Then he stepped inside as she ushered him in. He entered slowly like someone unsure of his place in the room. Zarya closed the door behind him. She realized she hadn't even had time to process what happened to her that day. Losing her job, the missing files, Emily disappearing. All of it felt distant compared to the grief sitting in front of her. Woojin looked like a man who had been hollowed out. She didn't even have time to grieve or the space. Not yet, anyways. He was more broken than she was, and somehow she had become the one holding everything together. Zarya watched him move slowly into the room. Honestly, she was beginning to feel overwhelmed herself. If someone had told her a month ago that her life would look like this, losing her job, a dead child, a corporate conspiracy unraveling right in front of her, she would have laughed in their face. Now it felt like the ground beneath her had completely shifted. Woojin sat down heavily on the couch, his hands trembling slightly. Zarya walked to the small cabinet beside the kitchen counter. She looked back at him. "You want a drink?" Woojin nodded without even looking up. She poured 2 glasses. When she returned, she handed him one and sat down on the floor, and he slid down beside her. And again, for a moment, neither of them spoke. But she looked in his eyes. She knew he had something to say. The room was quiet except for the faint click of the glass in Woojin's hand. Zarya studied his face. Then she leaned forward slightly. Something in his eyes told her that this night wasn't finished, not even close. And whatever he was about to say, she had a feeling that this day wasn't going to end without some sort of bang, exponential to the one that she had felt earlier. And the question came down to it. Was she ready? The night continued on. They both were drunker than ever. Bottles scattered all around. Woojin grabbed one and took a long drink. Zarya reached for the bottle to stop him, but he waved her away. His voice came through hoarse and rough. "Do you know why I ever cared about consciousness, about death, about crossing barriers?" Zarya shook her head quietly. "When Hanu, my first love, when she died, I wasn't there." His voice trembled. "I never got to tell her that she didn't ruin my life, that she wasn't a burden, that I loved her." His voice broke. "I begged the universe for one more moment with her, just one." A long, trembling silence filled the room. That wound, that impossibility, it changed everything in me. He turned towards Zarya. His eyes were glassy and haunted. He continued, "That's when I started reading everything. Everything about culture, about myth, about ancient texts, about the dead. I wasn't looking for magic. I was looking for patterns, for mechanisms. Then I found her story." His voice softened. "Ishtar, Iana, queen of heaven and earth. She descended to the underworld alive, through the 7 gates. Each gate took something from her. Power, identity, protection. Layer by layer." His eyes lifted again. "It wasn't symbolic. It was procedural. A step-by-step description of consciousness transitioning between states." Zarya's brow furrowed deeply. She wasn't dismissing him. She was listening. "Her journey," he continued, "wasn't about magic. It was about frequency, resonance, the slipping away of ego until only pure consciousness remained. I believed if I could understand that, I could map out those transitions, that I could build something that could follow that same path." Zarya looked up, horrified and amazed. "I did it. I built it. And it's complete. And I really think it could work. It just needs some fine-tuning." He glanced over at her. "The machine wasn't built from genius." "No," he shook his head. "It was built because I had a need to say something that I never got to say. And now that Minji's gone too, I can't lose her without trying. Zarya shook her head slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. Woojin, you're not thinking clearly. You're in pain. But Woojin leaned forward suddenly and grabbed her hands. His eyes were steady now, terrifyingly steady. Zarya, I never thought more clearly in my life. She looked at him, really looked. She was scared, so she waved him off. He was drunk. He would forget about it tomorrow in the morning. She hoped. The night carried on quietly after that. At some point, sleep overtook them both. When Zarya woke in the morning, the sunlight had pushed faintly through the curtains. Woojin was gone. A small note sat on the table. Zarya exhaled softly. Good. That would give her enough time to breathe. And finally, she could see what's on that flash drive. Despite her plans, she ended up sleeping most of the day. Of course, she didn't touch the flash drive. She was too exhausted. She laid in bed for much of the evening. When her phone rang again, the room was dark. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. She answered. A bartender's voice came through the line. Woojin. Drunk again? Zarya closed her eyes briefly. Patience. That was what he needed now. She washed her face, grabbed her keys, and drove across town to the small tavern. The ride back was quieter than she had expected. Woojin talked about the machine, of course, but this time he talked about the machine differently. He sounded more precise, more technical. She knew he must have really built something because this time he spoke like the Woojin she knew, not the man unraveling from grief, but the brilliant scientist. Zarya smiled faintly as she drove, watching him through the reflection of the windshield while he stared out the window. When he noticed her smiling, he turned toward her. He seemed almost embarrassed. What? Nothing, she shrugged lightly. It actually sounds like a good idea. He blinked. You should patent it. Woojin stared at her. Seriously? She nodded. I'm unemployed now. She gave a tired smile. I actually have plenty of time to submit the paperwork. You wouldn't actually do that though, right? It's crazy talk, right? Zarya didn't answer. She just gave a smile. He just looked at her, really looked at her. But he didn't say anything. He knew she was serious. She had always done that. Believed in him. The car rolled slowly into his driveway, and the silence between them felt different, not empty, not broken, but full of something neither of them were ready to name yet. The next morning, the sun hadn't even fully risen yet, and a loud banging shook Zarya's front door. Her eyes snapped open. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, disoriented. Her body still heavy from the exhaustion for the past 2 days. But the banging still continued, harder this time. Zarya groaned softly and rolled herself out of bed. No rest for the unemployed, I guess, she muttered to herself. She pushed herself out of bed and walked slowly toward the door, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Her brow furrowed. Woojin again? This early? It's 5 a.m. Did he even sleep? She pulled open the door. Woojin stood there breathing hard, eyes wide with strange intensity that instantly wiped the last bit of sleep from her mind. She expected him to be hungover, incoherent, devastated. But he wasn't. Woojin stood tall, focused. Definitely a different man from the man she saw hours earlier. He held a thick envelope and a folded blueprint. If I don't make it back, these explain everything. Zarya felt the ground shift beneath her. Woojin, no. Please, this isn't real. This isn't possible. He stepped closer. Ishtar crossed the veil, Zarya. I can too. But I need you to help me to build the gate. Zarya's breath trembled. You mean the machine? Damn it, Minso, she thought to herself. He nodded once. Help me. He looked at her, pleading. Zarya closed her eyes, hoping that she was dreaming or imagining it. But when she opened them, she understood. He wasn't asking. He was already going. 1 week had passed since Woojin had asked her to help him build the gate. Zarya was still reeling from everything that had happened. The grief, the firing, the secrets that seemed to be unfolding faster than she could keep up with him. Honestly, she needed rest. Real rest. But she knew that if she was going to help Woojin through whatever madness he had his mind set on, she needed stability first. She needed a job. So she made a call. One of her old contacts answered on the second ring. And a short conversation later, she had an interview scheduled in 2 days. Zarya wasn't worried. Work had never been the hard part of her life. She sat still for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. Then she exhaled slowly. Now it was time to turn her focus back to Woojin. Zarya met with Woojin to discuss the particulars. She knew if she was going to win the fight with David E., she would have to help him clear his mind. When he approached, he looked warm when he saw her dressed in her usual dress attire. Without forming pleasantries, she began. I have a meeting set up, someone I trust, a former classmate. He's a scientist now, one of the best neurosurgical minds in the field. Woojin's eyes opened slowly, confusion mixing with awe. You already arranged something? She nodded. Dr. Kofi Ngunde. He's brilliant. He won't judge you, and he'll listen. Woojin swallowed hard. You're helping me? After all this? Zarya held his face between her hands, studying him. Of course I'm helping you. I'm not walking away while you're breaking. We're going to figure this out, together. His expression crumpled. Overwhelmed with gratitude and grief coiled all together. When they arrived at the quiet cafe, the morning breeze had been moving gently through the trees. Woojin and Zarya waited at the corner table, and then footsteps approached. A well-dressed African man arrived, confident, observant, eyes sharp with intelligence. Zarya Taylor, still pulling me into the impossible, I see. Zarya smiled faintly. Kofi, this is Woojin. Dr. Ngunde studied Woojin carefully, not judging, but assessing, recognizing trauma, intellect, and desperation all at once. Woojin extended a trembling hand. Thank you for meeting me. I know this sounds insane. Ngunde held up his hand. Let's start with what you're trying to do first. Then I'll tell you whether it's insane. He sat, pulled out his notepad, and the world of science began opening its doors to the supernatural. The three of them sat with untouched drinks. Dr. Ngunde studied Woojin for a long moment, not with doubt, but clinical curiosity. Finally, start from the beginning, not the grief, the science. Woojin nods, studying his breath. The machine suspends metabolic activity without shutting it down, he swallowed. The minimum threshold needed to detach consciousness without killing the body. Ngunde's brows lifted slightly, impressed, but cautious. And where does this story about myth come into it? Woojin didn't flinch. Ishtar's descent, the 7 gates, it's not fantasy. It's a neurological model. Different layers of consciousness being peeled away. Ngunde leans back, considering. Zarya watches him anxiously, waiting for skepticism. But Ngunde surprises her. Actually, that aligns with some African cosmological models as well. They recognize the soul as being layered, traveling between planes, requiring the shedding of identity markers. Woojin looks up, startled. He continues, more slowly, shifting to layman's language. Every brain has 3 cells. There is the physical self, your senses, your heartbeat. Then there's the emotional self, memory, fear, love. And then there's the deep self, the part that activates in near-death experiences, coma states, profound meditation. When people talk about crossing into another world, they're really describing a shift that is shifting into the deep self. If your machine can isolate the deep self without damaging the brain, then, theoretically, the consciousness could drift, not to a physical hell, but a plane assessed at the threshold of death. Zarya inhales sharply, part fear, part awe. So, are you saying it's possible? Igunde doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he fixes his gaze on Woojin with a long, intense stare. Let me tell you another story. Not Babylonian, African. Woojin leans forward. In Yoruba tradition, there's a gatekeeper. His name is Isu. Not a demon, a messenger. He stands at the crossroads between realms. He doesn't decide who crosses, but he recognizes when someone is walking a path they're not meant to walk. He points to Woojin gently. What you're trying to do, Isu would call that walking backwards into the land of the shadows. Zarya looks at Woojin, worried that he would take it as discouragement. Igunde continues before anyone can speak. But the important thing is this. The myths don't say it's impossible. They say it's dangerous. They say it requires surrendering layers of self, just like Ishtar did. Igunde sits back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully at the blueprint again. Your approach, suspending the body just above the death threshold, could theoretically isolate the deep self long enough for travel. But if you go there, Woojin, how would you get back? Woojin answers without hesitation. My daughter, Hannah. My only daughter, she needs me. She'll be the reason. My anchor. Zarya swallows hard, absorbing the answer to the question she feared the most, torn between admiration and terror. Igunde's expression changes subtly, from analytical to solemn. He reaches forward and gently taps the blueprint. This isn't just madness. This is grief transformed into engineering. He leans in. Let me help you refine it. We need to increase safety margins, stabilize the oxygen curve, and build a return stimulus. Zarya lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Woojin looks like a man receiving oxygen after drowning. Igunde rests his hands on the table. But listen carefully. If we do this, you may be crossing a line no humans ever crossed, especially not with intentions. And on the other side, you will not be met with science. You'll be met by story. And story always has a price. And the question is, are you willing to pay it? If you are, we'll need industrial-grade regulators, 3 of them, a custom wiring. You'll have to piece it out from the lab so David doesn't notice. Woojin nods slowly, absorbing every instruction. I can extract components over time, nothing that triggers inventory flags. Igunde nods. Good. And I'll help you source the medical-grade stabilizers. You handle the consciousness theory. Leave the body to me. For the first time in days, Woojin breathes. Zarya watches him exhale a breath that sounds like hope and grief blended together. Then, Igunde turns to her. And you should not be employed while you're doing all this. Zarya raises her eyebrows. What makes you think I'm still unemployed? Both men looked up shocked and impressed. No way. Don't even think about it. My hospital is expanding its research legal team. I can make a call today. Zarya's breath catches, eyes filled with admiration. You'd really do that? He shrugs casually. You're brilliant. And we're rivals to E Industries. Hiring you would be delicious. Zarya laughed softly, the first real laugh in a long time. 3 months went by, and life reshaped itself in ways that none of them could have possibly predicted. Woojin quietly removed components from the lab piece by piece, Zarya settled comfortably into her new job, locking down every one of Woojin's patents, closing legal doors in David's face before he even knew it existed. Dr. Igunde spent nights soldering wire into place with Woojin. Minso unraveled, pacing endlessly at home. Keeping Minji sedated and checking Minji's pulse every hour had begun to take its toll on her. David watched Woojin at work with growing frustration, sensing something shifting but unable to figure out what it was. One night, he stood in the window, the city lights reflecting in the glass, the rage boiling over in him. He stood there talking to himself. I need this patent. If I don't secure it, I'll lose everything. That kind of invention doesn't belong to a weak, grieving, sickly-looking father. It belongs to a man like me. A man smart enough to take it. History doesn't remember the inventor. It remembers the man who owned the invention. Me. He stood there, glaring at his reflection, impatient growing. In that moment, he decided it was time to make a move. Soon. The day finally came. The machine stood fully assembled now. Thick cables twisted across the floor. Woojin sat wearing the biometric suit Igunde designed to stabilize his temperature, his vitals, and his brain activity. Igunde double-checked the row of monitors, his voice low. If your vitals crash, we intervene. If they weaken, we stabilize you. But we will not wake you unless your body cannot maintain itself. You said you'll come back on your own, so we have to trust that. Woojin nodded once. Don't wake me. No matter what you see, no matter how long it takes. When I need to return, my body, it'll tell you. Igunde hesitated, then he accepted it. Zarya stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. We'll handle our part. We'll keep you alive. We'll watch every number, every beat, every breath. She looked at him with a gentleness he wasn't ready for. All you have to do is try. He exhaled slowly, watching her. He prepared months for this, studied every myth, built every circuit, accepted death as a possibility, but nothing prepared him for the way that she was looking at him just then. Zarya rested her hand on his, soft, warm, steady. Their eyes locked. And suddenly, Woojin, he felt something that he never thought he could feel, especially not going through everything he was going through. Something tender, something frightening. This definitely wasn't the look a sister gave her brother. And it wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation either. This was something else. And he couldn't tell if she saw him as brave or broken, strong or fragile, a friend or something more. He didn't even know what he felt. All he knew was that he wanted to come back, not just for Minji, but for her. For this moment, for whatever it was. Zarya squeezed his hand. Come back to us, Woojin. The sedative began flowing through the IV. Woojin's vision blurred. The last thing he saw was her face, soft, warm, full of love he didn't understand yet. Everything dimmed, everything faded. Darkness pulled him under. Then he heard it. A sound like wind, a pressure like water, a cold that isn't cold, a light that isn't light. Woojin gasped and opened his eyes. What he saw defied every law of physics he had ever written. His breath trembled, his voice cracked. Oh no. It's real. Next up, episode 3, Woojin's intense journey through hell, Zarya's intense battle in the courtroom. Get ready, like and subscribe. See you there.